Welcome back to Strange Form. Today, we're going to be looking at 3 Alien Romulus figures that I'm going to turn into better versions of themselves, i.e. I'll be building better worlds. So first off, we are going to take one of these, and we're going to basically take the leftover parts that I have from the dissection video I did of the Mezco alien. So I still have a torso, the feet, the hands, as well as the head, and some other miscellaneous parts I might be able to use for like pegs and joints. And so I'm going to take this and try to basically get the best of both worlds, which is the fine detail that Mezco put into the plastic parts, and then forego the issues that everyone has been having with the rubber portions of the Mezco figure by using this one's arms, abdomen, and legs to basically cover all the parts that were originally rubber and give me even more posability, so I don't have to worry about the rubber cracking when I put it in different poses. And the goal here is not to make a statue, but to make a fully posable figure by blending the two, and not something that's fragile will fall apart easily. And so I want to take you guys step by step through that process. Secondly, we will be looking into basically taking one of the figures and doing what I did in the last video, but showing more close-ups of that process and kind of how it's done. But you will see a lot of it when I'm doing the Mezco refit. So you're going to learn how I shortened the figure and brought it more into the 1/12 scale realm so that it plays well with your, G.I. Joe Action Force or, whatever other figures you want to have battling your aliens. And third, I'm going to be basically taking the head off of one and refitting it with the Medicom head. Medicom comes with 2 different heads and 3 different jaw positions, as well as different inner mouths and whatnot. And it's always miffed me that I would have to buy another one to display both heads. So I'm looking forward to actually having another figure to display the head on. And I'm going to try to replace the tail as well, so that the only parts I'll be using are the ones that are, the ones that are accurate to the 1979 Big Chap. Now, what are you going to need for this process? Well, first off, you're going to need a drill and several large drill bits, basically 3/8 and above. So some big ones that will allow for you to hollow out the chest cavity, and some medium-sized ones for making peg holes. You will probably need a file, right? And some sandpaper, and you will definitely need Dremel. Doesn't need to be an expensive one. I usually use the corded one for like longer sessions where I actually have to really grind something down. But I also have a cordless one that I've had for years and years, and I really like this one, especially for precision drilling. So tiny little holes, like when you need to make holes for the tubes to go in the back, that come from the neck and whatnot. This is perfect for that because it doesn't have anything tugging at the back end, and it's a fairly fast Dremel. But sometimes you need to buff something for longer than the battery will hold out for that one, and so there's where a corded one will come in handy. Now you can do it all with a corded one, and you can get one that's corded for about $20. On top of that, now your mileage may vary and you may want to do the water boiling method. I've just found that I like to do a lot of the taking the figure apart and softening parts up, to basically be reinserted and whatnot with a heat gun. And the reason I like to do it with a heat gun is that the boiling basically, you have to boil it every time you want to do it again. So if you have to take a piece off, then you have to put a piece back in, then you're going to have to boil it again. Heat gun allows for you to get that done quickly. But a word of advice, heat guns definitely have a tendency to destroy toys. So you want to be quick with it. You want to know how hot it's getting. Maybe you should try a couple passes with a hairdryer first before you get into using a heat gun, as you can end up melting parts and there's no bringing them back, after you've done that. So my advice is if you're really comfortable using heat guns, then, this is definitely the fastest route. If not, I would try the water boiling or possibly a hairdryer. Just remember, these get really hot and so quick passes, and if you see it start to get shiny, pull it away quickly because the top layer is starting to melt. On top of that, you're going to need lots of little clippers and small tools, little needle nose pliers and whatnot. I like to do a lot of the cutting not with like scalpels or X-Acto knives. I usually don't use the hobby. I do use the hobby knives for a lot of fine tooling, but when I'm trying to carve things off, I actually like to be able to have like a long blade. So I actually usually use most of my knives and just kind of do it as if I were whittling. And so when I need to take pieces off, that gives me more control over a broader surface. So that's just the way I do it, but it's not the way you have to do it. And one thing you've got to remember when you start doing any of this is you are creatively breaking a toy. And so there's no right or wrong way to really do this, as in the end, you are taking something they put together in a specific way and you're reorganizing the way that it basically works. And so when you're shortening the legs, you're taking material off, material they meant to be there. When you're changing where the little cup is that fits onto the ball joint and where that seats, again, that's not the way the factory had it set. And so you have to remember that there is no real completely right way. When this ends, you will have a broken but remade toy. And hopefully this is something that you want to do, but take each step carefully, because you don't want to end up going past the point of no return with a cut or something like that, and then end up basically junking the toy and then having to start over. One more thing you'll probably need is a really good super glue, something that sets fast. For years and years and years, I've used Loctite, both the gel glue and just the regular. I swear by this stuff. This is my favorite super glue to use. It glues quickly, it glues almost any surface, and it's a really strong glue. So Loctite is the one that I would suggest, but use whatever you're comfortable with. Through most of this, I'll just sort of show close-ups of what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. And you can follow that, or you can add to it, or figure out a different way. So a lot of this process is just sort of having fun with it and hoping it ends up okay. All right, now one of the things I want to do is basically switch out his feet, as these ones have more detail, and I'm going to try and basically cut here and then drill up into the calf section and then glue this metal piece in there so that he's got motion on the foot, and then he's got this much more detailed foot. For the midsection, I'm basically going to drill up into here and kind of create a ball joint that'll let him maintain that crunch, but also keep a good hold with this one. And then I'm going to put this one's arms on this one, but I am going to try and put this ball joint at the end of the arm so that he can use these hands that came with the Mezco figure, because I really like these hands a lot better than the ones that come with the Romulus figure. And then it's about basically figuring out how to attach the head, which I took the dome off so it would be easier to work with without cracking that. And then this head, it has a ball joint that's slightly smaller than the one that comes with this. This actually should be pretty easy to modify in order to get onto this one. Now, one of the questions I've been asked before is, because I use a lot of knives on this channel and I'm always using some, flashy knife or some sort of bally song or something that has a lot of flourish, what knife that I use most regularly. And in my everyday, my EDC, the one I carry around everywhere, is the Vosteed Porcupine. And the reason is that it's easy to deploy. It doesn't look like a weapon. This one has like sort of the brown finish, the copper finish with the green scales. And so when I pull it out in public in order to cut, the kid's toy open or something like that, it doesn't freak people out. But it's very, very, very sharp. And it's easy to maintain, but it's also not too terribly expensive. I think this one's like $50-$60. And so, if you're carrying around like a Benchmade or something like that, and you chip the blade or you drop it or you tip it or you end up losing it in the field or something like that, that's going to hurt a lot more than something like this. So this one is basically my everyday, the one I carry around. So, I think that this is one of those happy mediums between price and quality. All right, so let's open this up. do here, you know, same as last time. I did get lucky as the paint jobs and the sculpt details are actually really good on all of the copies I got. And like I said, order them from Walmart.com, ended up getting them straight from NECA. So evidently NECA sells their products straight through Walmart. So basically, the torso is, you know, the details on it are soft. And so that's one thing I want to nix. And the head I'm going to, you know, take off in favor of the other one. But I'm going to keep the arms, and I'm going to keep the waist here and the legs, which will help me get rid of a lot of the issues that I've had with, you know, the Mezco version, and how soft the details have gotten over time, and the paint's basically just, you know, kind of disappeared, and it's, you know, prone to tearing, and eventually all this rubber is probably going to rot away. And I did a whole video on the Mezco one, the problems I had with it, so it's an old one, but, you know, if you're interested, go find it. It's actually kind of interesting how this thing works inside, and the armature that they used. But let's see if we can build something that's a little more durable. Now, again, I like the fact that this one has the toes that go up like this, but, you know, I think that these feet look better, or just more accurate, so I'm gonna use these. And you can see all the jawbone details here are very soft, and they're a little crisper and more pronounced on this one. The tail is going to be, I think, the most difficult thing. This is definitely not the tail from the original Big Chap. It's, you know, something that's more in kind of tune with the Queen, which is something really cool they could have done in Romulus, kind of saying this, you know, different from the one they originally got, because they molt into queens, or, you know, kind of give us that part of the life cycle. But nope, we got a giant weird baby man. But I want to see if I can get this tail flush here and able to still articulate without coming off. And so I've got some ideas, one of which is to basically drill 2 posts into the end here and glue them, and then drill the posts into the butt here, and then that will give the rest of the gluing to this portion a lot more to hold on to, which will basically make it firmer, and you're able to bend it around and do all of that. So I'm gonna have to heat this up and pop the tail off. As for the arms, I'm not quite sure what type of pegs are under here, so I'll be interested to see and figure out how to fit them into these peg holes so that they work correctly and won't keep popping out and whatnot. First step is basically to heat the figure up. Now, the thing I did with the last one is I shortened the legs slightly, right? And I shortened the torso. Well, I didn't shorten the torso. I shortened the stomach by pushing it up further into the torso, by taking everything out and creating a new ball joint up here. So this could basically pop in further. And as you can see, here is the difference between these. You can see that the waist is a lot longer on this one than this one. Legs are a lot longer on this one than this one. And so this one is able to stand pretty well next to, like, you know, any 1/12 scale figures, whereas this one stands too tall. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to shorten these legs just slightly and shorten the torso so that it fits up in here, which should look interesting. And again, this will be a Mezco Big Chap without any rubber except for the tail. I've noticed that these elbows, they don't want to twist, right? I don't know if it's that there isn't a twist post here, or if it's just, you know, stuck because of the paint or how tight it is, but you can't pose him like with his arms out, you know, up and out like this. They just flip right back. And so I might address that as well. And I think that would actually be pretty easy by using the armature elbow from the the Mezco. But first things first is to take this one apart, and we're going to do that by heating it up with the heat gun and popping the parts off, and I'll show that next. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and heat him up in order to pop all the parts off so we can work on him a piece at a time. And some people like to do this by boiling the figure, as there are no metal pins or any pieces that have to be unscrewed. These basically just fit together with plastic pins, and so the whole thing's plastic on plastic. And boiling, I sometimes worry about doing more damage to the paint than just heating up for a short period of time will do. And some people use a hairdryer. I like to use a more heavy-duty heat gun, as it just gets the job done faster. Pop off the other. All right, so he is completely apart. I think maybe the tubes might be separate pieces too, but I think they're glued in. Arms, legs, and abdomen. These parts I'll use for something else later. Now I'm going to have to figure out how the tail connects to this portion. It might not be one that pops in, but is actually encased. I'm not sure. But let's heat it up and see. All right, there we go. And it's out. Careful, it looks like the tail is made of a very soft plastic, and so it's going to want to start melting almost right away. So we've got our main parts for the NECA figure. So next we have to figure out the best way to start attaching these parts. Paint scheme wise, they are very similar, so it shouldn't look too different actually when reassembled. The main things I need to figure out here are how to attach the hands to these arms, the Mezco hands to these arms, and how to get this torso in here while still holding on to a lot of the articulation. And again, how to attach this tail, which actually should attach pretty easily. But the tail I think I'll do last. Alright. So I've got that out. So the foot is held in by a little pin, right? That basically is a plastic pin through a loop, and there's kind of a little ratchet on it, so it holds position, but is actually really easy to get out, which I'll allow this one to go in fairly easily. Yeah. That is really interesting. The arm peg is actually the exact same size. These actually snap in like that, that easy. They're actually a little bit loose, so I'll have to put something in there to sort of give them a little bit more rigidity. But that's really interesting that they're the exact same size. Yeah, so these arms fit perfectly. That is weird. All right, now that we got most of the pieces apart, we have to take these cups here out of the legs. So right here, there's a small kind of stubby post, right, that fits into a hole. And the reason for taking this out is so that we can drop it down so we can make the leg just a little bit shorter so the legs don't look too incredibly long next to the torso when the thing is completely finished. Like I said, it's interesting that the arms fit into the sockets like almost perfectly. They're just a little loose, so I'm gonna have to do something to snug it up just a little bit, but overall I'm actually pretty impressed that I don't have to do a lot of drilling there. I do have to drill into here quite a bit in order to push this back so that I can get the post on the abdomen to fit a little deeper in here. As you can see, it's too long, and I want it to fit about what would that be, like to here, right? That should be good. So I'm gonna drill in deeper, then drill another post hole, and that way I can just use the same style of articulation. As for the legs, just like with the previous one, once that is done, you can just click it back into place. The legs are a little bit shorter and they actually look perfect. So, but what we're going to end up getting is a basically Mezco Alien with no rubber parts. So it'll basically be the full Mezco, except I'm going to use this Ultimate Xenomorph Big Chap because, like I said before in the last video, these pieces are a lot smaller than NECA's other pieces, so they fit with a 1/12 figure really well. And then I've been developing a way to get the tail in. I think the best way is probably going to be to take the original tail post right here and drill a hole and then glue it in and just snap the tail back into the butt post back here, basically using the same articulation. So I think that'll work. As for the feet, I'm going to go ahead and cut off a little bit of this rounded piece that was for the pin and just leave this sort of cuff, stirrup here. This way, when I fit in the post for the Mezco foot, right, it'll come all the way down. And the Mezco post, this is going to be the challenging part because this is really actually fairly thick metal, and so I can't just clip it. So I'm actually going to have to like file it in half to about here, and then drill that hole into here, which will probably go to about here, and then just fill it with glue and stick it in, and it'll be there forever, and it'll give me all the articulation of this Mezco foot, which will look good. As for the hands, I'm going to use the previous arms, right, post. So I made a little mark here on both of them, and so I'm going to cut it here and then drill in and just push it all the way in with a little bit of glue, and that should allow for me to have the same articulation with the hands and use the Mezco hands instead of the ones that came with the NECA. Now for drilling, I'm going to start with a large drill bit and just go straight into where the hole is already there. Because this is a soft plastic in here, it comes out really quick. So it's not going to be too hard to actually basically take this down a few inches and then fit in this other one here. All right, now that I use the smaller one, and as you can see, I'm already deepening the hole quite a bit. Now there's a ton of other ways you could do this. You could do it more delicately by carving it out with, a little X-Acto knife, or you could, basically take it out with a Dremel. You could do it with basically a hard grit sandpaper on a Dremel, and then just sort of, widen it. For me, just the fastest way is a Big Chap power tool. All right, with some drilling, some cutting, I hollowed this out quite a bit, and then this fits in perfectly. And then I'm going to use basically this ball joint. I'm going to heat things up and use the ball joint from the original in here in order to give this one the same articulation. But here we have the torso and hands, right? So that's the Mezco torso and neck, and the NECA hands and waist, all right, which honestly look really good together. As a matter of fact, I think they look a lot better than the original Mezco, which is really soft. So far I'm liking the way this is turning out. I just need to basically stiffen these up a bit. So you can see this is going to create a lot of plastic shavings. So be sure you're not sweeping away little parts you're going to need while you keep your workspace clean. So I need to figure out how to affix the tail and shorten the legs and put them on, and then of course the hands. But first, let's get these cups out of here. So the way I did it is I basically just heated it up really well. Grabbed it with a pair of pinchers. Let's see, get it focus. When it's out, so you've got a little pin there, and this little cup piece, and then there's a hole in there, which is fairly easy after you cut this away, and then a little bit, basically take this down a little bit, and then just cut the hole just a little bit deeper, and you can snap this right back in place, get the same articulation. So the legs are just a little bit long, just slightly long for it to be proper scale. So the first thing we're going to do is carve off this small amount of material that was used for holding the pin in place, since we're not going to be using the original feet. Like I said, I like the original feet, but they just lack the detail that the Mezco has. So there it is, which I think looks a lot better. Yes, I'm using an Italian stiletto to do this. All right, that looks good. I like it. So now for cutting the top, you have a lot of different options. One of them is to just take a Dremel and just start kind of removing a little bit of plastic with a sandpaper Dremel bit, and that's a good way to slowly do it. Or you can just start, kind of mark it off how much you want to take off, and then just start cutting. But how I suggest to do it is basically don't get down to where this tube is, so kind of like follow that, just go above that, right, and then kind of up and around, and then down a little bit for here. So basically take off that portion, right, so right through there, and that'll let you put the cup back in, and then it'll basically look a lot more flush with the waist. And this is how I test it out, is I fit it without the cups to see how far up I want it. Basically everything from there is what I wanted to cut it to. Now, as you can see, if I pull that out, that's quite a bit of material. And that will improve the look of this thing quite a bit. All right, so what I decided to do with the arms was to take the armature that was from the Mezco and actually just drill all the way through the arm, and then just put the armature through, then drill a small kind of post to plug that into, and there we have full movement, right? It's tight, doesn't fall out, gives me the ability to move back and forth. And I did this because while I was messing with the other joint, it just came apart. So the NECA one just broke when I was trying to heat it up and get it to get some movement. And so know that this joint isn't really designed to move in or out. It'll just snap. So it basically just is a double joint that does this, but I'm fine with just having a single joint. I'm going to go ahead and spray paint the metal in here black so that it matches, but it's not really that visible, and I think it looks good, and it's allows me to put the little ball post here so that I can put the Mezco hands flush, right? So I can use any one of the Mezco hands on this, which is great because they look a lot better than the NECA ones do. And now I've also got the ball joint in here so I can seat it. I'm going to put a little bit, build up a little bit in here so that it seats in a little more sturdy, but it's going to be able to move and all that. The tail, I decided to go ahead and put the post from the previous tail. So I just basically took it off of this one, right? Just pulled it out, heated it up and pulled it out and put it on this one, glued it in, and now I will be able to plug it in here, and it will just continue the vertebrae right into the tail. Actually, it looks like it was designed that way. So that's going to work really well. As for the hands, these are still really floppy, so I'm toying with different ideas to get this a little more snug in here, and I've got some, so I'm going to basically play with them for a minute and then tell you what I ended up doing and show you how to do it. As for the feet, so what I've decided to do is mark each one here, and I'm going to basically cut through here, and then I'm going to drill the same length here and just basically give a snug connection, and that way the foot will work with the leg. Now right now what I'm doing is I'm cleaning up the cuts that I've made, because these don't look great, and so basically the way I do it is I just go over it with sandpaper Dremel head and just keep going over it with lighter grits until it looks pretty smooth and nice and will fit and move easily. A lot of it will be hidden by the soft plastic here in the hips, so it's not something that I really have to make look that pretty, but it's like when he's like out or squatting or whatnot, you'll be able to see it. So that's where we are. So let's go ahead and start working on these legs, and then we can basically piece the whole thing together. I think this is actually going to look a heck of a lot better than the Mezco version. So for drilling this down, basically to seat these little cups a little bit lower, so I want them about here. The best way that I found to do that is basically to just take a drill bit that is roughly the same size as the cup head and drill down, and then a slightly smaller drill bit to go even deeper so that this part plugs in and has the proper tension. So first step is to literally just very slowly take it down down, and then fit it, push it down, and then just keep going. So it rides a lot higher now, and is more nicely in scale with everything else. So the next step is going to be gluing this in and doing the same to the other one, so that, you know, I can pose it without having to worry about the legs falling off all the time. So here we have the legs, arms, tail, and torso fitted. So everything's all put together. I still have to tension up the shoulders, but honestly, this compared to this really looks a lot more like Balaji Bideo's figure. So I think that this actually is going to look a lot better than the original Mezco, and it's shaping up to look a lot more like the Medicom. I still have to put the feet on, but I was able to take enough height off of him that he's actually the same height as the Mezco. This, when finished, will be a true 1/12 scale Big Chap with very few rubber parts. The tail is still going to be, you know, that rubber, but other than that, it's all plastic parts. So if you want a Big Chap that's going to look more movie accurate and also last, especially if your Mezco is coming apart, this is a good analog. And again, you're going to be able to use all of your Mezco accessories with it. So the hands, the inner jaws, all of that will work. I think this one actually makes grabbing the Mezco one worth it again. So if you can pick up the Mezco for like $60, $70 and then, you know, $28 for one of the Romulus Ultimate Xenomorphs, there you've got a pretty good figure. All right, as you can see here, I went ahead and cut the feet from the post well below the knee joint at the shin, probably about 1/2 inch. And the purpose of that is to use that peg for tension to go up into the foot and like basically be able to rotate and move around. Now, your mileage may vary. You may not want to use the Mezco feet, as the feet that came with the figure are really very close. The Mezco one just has a little bit more detail and a little bit, you know, better paint applications, but honestly, these are nearly the same. They're the exact same foot size, as you can see. So if you want to just keep the original with the bendy toe, that's a good option too. It basically has the sheep's jawbone shape, but this one, the Mezco, actually has the teeth, some molded detail, and a little bit extra molded detail, like on the bottom of the foot and around the foot. That's not found on the NECA. But like, they're so close that it's almost not worth the effort to do what I just did, right? Maybe just repaint this one and, you know, basically just stop at the feet, and I think it'd be just fine. But I wanted to put the Mezcos on the legs, so that's the way I'm doing it. So again, I took a file, right, and I just cut it off. You could probably use a grinder on a Dremel or any number of things. The one thing that you can't use, this is actually pretty thick and sturdy metal, and it doesn't go very easily with like clippers or whatnot, tin snips. I found that I could make dents, but I couldn't really, you know, get it to give, and so I just ended up taking just filing through it. But that gives me, you know, the same articulation that the Mezco had, and the whole purpose of this is to use as many of the Mezco parts as I possibly can, just replacing the bits that are mostly rubber. So I'm trying to kind of keep with the Mezco to make a perfect Mezco figure. Now, as you can see, this is actually pretty wide, you know, the post here, and so fitting it in here, because this is a very thin piece, is going to require some very careful dremeling, like up in here, to make this wide enough without basically punching through any of the shin or the ankle. But once it's done, then I can glue a lot of the pieces that need to be glued, and I'm come up with some interesting ways to give this some more tension, which are working. So this one's actually almost finished. Definitely the most difficult hurdle to overcome was getting the armature joint through the forearm. in that it was very slow going, drilling out, hollowing out that forearm. And I ended up using some engine grease in order to get the armature through the forearm without damaging it. And that allowed me to get the ball joint on the other side, which of course facilitated the hands. The other minor issue I ran into was how to snug up the arms at the shoulder, because they were really loose in the chest cavity. So what I ended up doing was going to the hardware store, just grabbing a little baggie of washers, and I basically found the right washer to kind of fit on the peg so that when it went through, that washer actually held it really snug in place and still allowed for all the movement. And if the washer ever wears out, I can just put on another one. And so that was my solution to it, and it worked really well. So now it can basically hold any position statically. When affixing the tail, like I said before, I ended up using the pin from the previous tail, but I did carve the tail down a little bit to fit it to where the space on the butt was, and that allowed for basically it to peg into place and sit flush. And then I just added a little bit of glue, and it's not going anywhere. And so it allows me to bend it and put it in any position. So pegging this big chap works. In the next section, I'm going to talk about what I did to basically shrink down the NECA Romulus Xenomorph. All right, now for the second one. So this one, I was just going to show you how I went about making this one in a step-by-step. So if you watch the previous portion of this video, you will see that I took the legs off. You're just going to cut this portion of the leg up the same way you would have if you were to do the Mesco one. So you just kind of follow this line along here, cut all that off, then drill down inside so that you can re-put the cup in lower, which will allow you then to connect the leg a little further up and shorten this. The torso, I already did it, but I take a big drill bit and just drill in, just get rid of everything until the cavity will accept a good portion. I would say about maybe half an inch in, right? So you want to be able to push the abdomen about a half an inch into the chest cavity here. Then you can put the ball back on and then take a smaller drill bit and just make a small hole that will let you then take the ball joint and plug it in just further up. And it'll give you the same amount of articulation, twisting, and whatnot. You don't have to do it. You could probably just glue this in here if you didn't want to have any movement, but I like the ability to actually be able to move this a little bit for posing. And I already took it out, but then you want to take out the mouth. You can keep it in if you want, but like I said, I have some extra Mezco mouths, so I put one of those in here. I just think it looks a lot better. And I don't do anything to the feet. The tail of this one I took off because I'm actually going to kind of reinsert it and put kind of a little ball joint in there so the tail has a little more free movement. That's how I'm doing this one, but I'm going to do another. And the only thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do this exactly the same way, but take off the head, right, and put on this Medicom head. But in order to do that, I'm going to have to cut off a good portion of this so I can use that ball joint for the Medicom and kind of fit those two together, and then throw the Medicom head on one of these, which will look cool. We'll do a pose gallery in just a second, but this one ended up looking really good. I think that all the parts are now glued in. He has same mobility, same posability. This one is, I think, one of my favorite posable figures now. Like I said, the best of both worlds with both the NECA and Mezco parts. And I think this one addresses a lot of those Mezco complaints. Here we have my second shrunk down Romulus and my Medicom Romulus crossbreed. Basically, it's a Medicom head, and it's a 79 accurate tail that I pulled off one of my older NECA Big Chaps, one that had a broken leg. And third is the Mezco NECA hybrid. As you can see, the Medicom MAFEX and its NECA counterpart are a little bit separated in size. The NECA is definitely a little bit bigger. However, I actually think that the head fits better on the NECA than it does the Medicom, and you get the bonus of it not falling apart every single time you go to pose it. I was able to make a makeshift ball joint that went on the neck that allowed for the head to be popped off, so it can actually take both MAFEX heads. So nothing was glued. So if I'm displaying one on the Medicom, I can actually just put the other on this one and display both heads, which is a nice bonus. I'm not going to go through a whole bunch of poses for the second shrink down that I did, as I did a bunch of those in the last episode. He is still fully posable. He's just a little bit shorter and will fit well with G.I. Joe and Balaverse figures. And here's the one from my last episode next to this new one. So basically you can just do this over and over again. It's a fairly easy process and a great way to army build. Here's the Mezco NECA next to the Mezco. The Mezco NECA is a little bit taller than the Mezco, and part of that is because I didn't push the ball joints on the feet in too far because I wanted more range of motion. I was able to sort of get the bowing position, which shows that there is quite a bit of flexibility in posing. Personally, I really think that this Mezco NECA hybrid is actually where I wanted the figure to go in the first place. I never really needed a seamless body, so this is actually perfect and would definitely occupy the number 2 spot under the Kotobukiya on my list. And I really hope that if Mezco decides to jump back into the wonderful world of Alien, that they learn from their mistakes and give us a standard body rather than a seamless one. All right, now that we have all of these finished, I hope you guys enjoyed the process, and maybe this will give you a jumping off point to fix some of your damaged Mezco figures, largely because I'm noticing the failure rate on that one is rising even over the years. So, you know, with the prices of the Mezcos coming down, this might be a happy medium to pick one up, plus one of these NECAs, providing it's not broken or missing anything or has the wrong feet, and turn your Mezco into a NECA Mezco hybrid. Anyway, that was my idea. And, you know, basically, I also like the fact that these Romulus Xenomorphs are like really in scale with 1/12 figures, and then they shrink down really easily. And so that's another process. You know, army building with these would be a lot of fun, and you could definitely do a lot of dioramas with these figures, especially after you shorten the legs and the abdomen. They look great. And like I said before, I went ahead and left the one that I put the Medicom head on in scale. I shortened the waist a little bit, but the rest of him I basically just left in the same scale that he came in. So he's a little taller than 1/12, but honestly, I think proportionally, he looks a lot like Beloja Bideo. And I think that this is really a striking figure after replacing the head and shrinking it down a little, which is funny because that's the one thing that NECA just kind of keeps getting wrong, is the head's a little too big and it's a little, you know, the maw and the face are a little too big and cartoony. And if you just, you know, sort of altered that, and not altered it to the point that they did with the Romulus one, where they completely changed the back of the head and the front of the mouth and a portion of the neck. I mean, it looks cool as just a generic Xenomorph, but this definitely isn't a big chap. And so with the hyper accurate Medicom Big Chap head, this is near perfect. It's much more posable than the Medicom Big Chap, which is really fiddly and falls apart while you're trying to pose it because of all the joints they put in it. And it's really sturdy. And then as for the NECA Mezco hybrid, this pretty much solves all of my issues with that figure. Now here's the Mezco and here is the NECA Mezco hybrid. They're about the same. He's standing more upright, but they're almost identical. There's a fraction of an inch difference. This one's a little taller, but honestly, I think it works. But other than that, I've been able to retain all of his posability, actually add some, so you don't have to worry about the rubber splitting and whatnot as you put in more dynamic poses. I was able to keep the tail, I was able to keep the hands, and of course I was able to keep the torso and the head, and the feet. And it worked out really well. This doesn't fall apart when you play with it. By way of scale, it's much more accurate than the Mezco, which seems a little thick in comparison when you look at the two, you know, back to back. And so I think this just solves all of those issues that people had with the Mezco. So hopefully I've given some of you the inspiration to basically do your own thing with the figure. I would say the biggest issue you're probably going to run into doing this is NECA quality control, in that so many of their figures come damaged or warped or missing parts, or the parts installed incorrectly. And that's where, your I think biggest hurdle is going to be. These are easy to take apart by warming them up. They're easy to put back together. They're easy. They fit really nicely with the Mezco parts and whatnot. But of the 3 that I ordered here, and I went into this in Instagram, one of them had 2 right feet installed on him, so I had to take one of the feet off. Luckily, I had an extra and put another foot on. And another one came with 2 of the same hands, and so I think he had two identical left hands, as opposed to a mirrored hand, which is what the package is supposed to come with. And that's the second time that's happened to me, as the Scorch Xenomorph, the NECA Scorch Xenomorph that I did a review on, had the exact same issue. And tons of those have come in broken. When the figure works, it's a really good figure. But the issue is NECA quality control is so bad that if you order it without seeing it in hand in the store, you're really gambling. And if you are seeing it in the store, you still don't know what issues you're going to have. Okay, so originally the next video I was going to do was going to be about unboxing a lot of the things that I have received over the last year and have had to put off reviewing. A lot of the stuff that I had in my pile of loot from Big Bad Toy Store, just boxes I had sent, and they just went into the attic because I had to fix the car, I broke my rib, all of the things that, I talked about in the last video that befell me. And so I just sort of had to put a bunch of stuff away. Some of the stuff I'm probably going to resell after I'm done reviewing. Some of the stuff I'm going to keep. I'm not sure which right now. Really depends on how well the channel does after I kind of finish a lot of these reviews. No matter what happens, I am planning on finishing my G.I. Joe checklist. So at the very least, I'll get through all of those at some point. But we'll see how some of these next episodes do, as well as this one, and kind of feel it out from there. After I'm done reviewing this stuff, if the channel doesn't kind of pull forward, I'm just not going to have the resources to, sort of keep getting things to review. But I'd like to show you what I do have and what I'm planning on showing you. A lot of it's, late from when everybody else got it. I'm sure there's 100 other reviews, but maybe you'd like to see my take on a lot of this stuff. First up is the 1/12 scale Pumpkinhead. I was really excited when I saw that Syndicate Collectibles was coming out with this posable figure. I had the original McFarlane figure from the movie Maniacs line, and that was one of the few things that I held on to before selling everything. And so this was a really cool one to see. Now that it's come down in price, I'm actually thinking about picking up the 1/6 scale as well in order to sort of compare the two. So we'll see about that. Soon I'm going to be looking at the G.I. Joe Striker. And I know this is jumping ahead several, since I think I'm only at, 20 something in my checklist that I'm doing. But the reason I'm jumping ahead with this one is that I got all the upgrades from Gridiron Studios, including the large cannon for the top. Something that inexplicably they decided to, not include with the Hasbro release. I don't know why. They tried to make it a little more real world. The fun part about this was the giant laser cannon on top. That's what I remember about the silhouette of the Striker from my childhood. And I think that's kind of silly that they decided to forgo that. So it's awesome that Gridiron Studios created that. And there's a couple other little pieces, as well as some new tires and stuff like that. So I'm going to dedicate an episode to sort of showing what it looks like tricked out with the Gridiron stuff. Though I'm showing these a little out of order, the next review is most likely going to be the Hot Toys Terminator figures. I'm going to do an expose on all 3. Like I said in the last video, I can't get things quickly. I am basically at the back of the line when it comes to Sideshow sending me stuff. I was right there, when they first put it up to order, but it just came late. So I just got the non-battle damaged T800, and so I'm going to have the 2 T800s and the T1000. We're going to look at all 3 of them together in a big episode, which should give more bang for your buck. So hopefully people will tune in to, take a look at that, even though other reviewers have been looking at those since like October. And speaking of reviews where I'm looking at a couple things at once, I am going to be looking at all three of Fans Hobbies sort of G.I. Joe vehicles. So the helicopter and the all-terrain attack carrier, which is actually basically a Chenoweth. And it even has the dart missile, that the Chenoweth can have, mounted onto the top of it. So it's really cool to see that instead of just making a G.I. Joe vehicle, it's actually based on real military technology. And this is something I'd really love to see Fans Hobby do more of. But we'll also be looking at the helicopter and the Air Eagle. So big episode for Fans Hobby, looking at all the G.I. Joe stuff, how the figures fit, how it basically fits with the rest of the classified line, and the ins and outs of all these vehicles. I'm really happy that Fans Hobby is doing it. I had said with all the Transformers third-party stuff that no one was out there doing G.I. Joe. And so now Fans Hobby is, and this stuff is popular. This one may seem a little bit silly, but I'm probably not going to dedicate a long episode to it. May even just do a short. But it's the Zoltar Speaks figure. And the reason I found this so exciting is that first off, my family, we all liked the movie Big. But second, when we were going to move to Massachusetts, a lot of things were uncertain. And we went on a big trip, around Washington, Oregon, which is where we're all from, and to kind of say goodbye to the state and all of that. And it was a huge move, and the children were really sort of apprehensive about it. And we went down to Oregon. We went to the Ripley's, believe it or not, and the Wax Museum. And they had a full-size Zoltar Speaks there. You're supposed to put money in it in order to get a ticket, but for some reason, when we came around the corner, it spit out a ticket. The ticket had said, a big move is coming up in your life and it's going to bring great things. And that one thing sort of like melted a lot of the apprehension that the kids had, and sort of made them hopeful about the future, as if something mystical had happened. And we ended up keeping that ticket and framing it. It's up on our mantle. And this was just such a cool thing because it actually spits out little tickets and has a whole roll of them and all that. And it's probably going to go on our fireplace mantle. And we'll ask it to be big, as well as base most of our life choices off of it. Now, this is one part of basically two things, which is the Ramen Toys Hunter tank and the Phalanx missile system for the Hunter tank. And I really think that Ramen has been hitting it out of the park. They've got a lot of really cool 1/12 stuff that they're putting out there. I think they're working their way up to a 1/12 scale Sky Striker at some point, because they've been releasing a lot of military pilot figures in that scale. But this tank really caught my attention, is it wasn't really that expensive. It actually was much cheaper than I think Hasbro would have done it. And I think this is the reason that Hasbro didn't end up doing either of the Joe tanks when they decided on last summer's HasLab. It took everybody by surprise that they decided to go with the Snowcat, as that wasn't as popular a vehicle as the Mauler or the other tank. And this one, I think, was part of why they decided not to do that, as you've got one third-party company doing almost perfect Mauler, and this one really looks a lot like the Mobat. And so, kind of have both of those boxes checked by third-party companies, and I think they're bringing it in cheaper than Hasbro would have. On top of that, it basically can be converted into the bridge layer and the Wolverine, which is really interesting that they went that way. I wish that they would allow for you to buy just the lower tank section without the turret at maybe $50 less. It seems like a waste to have to buy the tank over and over again, just to get use out of these. It would be cool to be able to display the Wolverine, the bridge layer, and the tank, all side by side. But we're at least going to get into it and, look at the accessories and the decals and talk about possible paint applications and upgrades in order to make it look a little less like a toy. Next up, we will be looking at the Star Speeder 1000. Now, I was really bummed that I missed the Star Speeder 3000, and that was the one from my childhood and the one that I remember riding every single time we would go to Disneyland and when we went to Disney World. But this one actually holds more nostalgia for me, as this is the one that I've ridden on the most with my children. And so most of my best memories of Star Tours, was taking my kids. And so this is one that is kind of for the whole family. We're going to display it in the movie room, and everyone's really excited to hear the doors open and the chime and see the little videos that it plays and all that. And I wanted to, basically bring that experience to you guys. On top of that, I've got a few Art the Clown figures that we'll be looking at, and of course the Aliens Romulus figure that's, coming from Sideshow, the Hot Toys version, at some point. I don't know when. I was hoping to have it by now. I'm seeing it roll into other people's hands, but when I talked to Sideshow, they seem to be indicating that it wouldn't be in my hands until, March, the middle of March at the earliest. I'm hoping that it's sooner than that, but when I do get it, I'll immediately, start filming a video, as I'm really excited to take a look at that one. Another thing that I've been asked several times to do a review on is the 52 Toys Yoshi Alien Big Chap figure, and I'm really on the fence about that one. There are aspects of it I like, and that's that it kind of looks like something out of Devilman or, Guyver. It's got that very sort of, almost Japanese armor, dragon armor kind of look to it. But the face just really ruins it for me. The sort of like, underbite, the small jaw and the tiny mouth. I'm having a really hard time liking it. And maybe I'll feel completely different if I get it in person, but it's quite pricey for its size, and I'm just not 100% sold on it. And I was hoping to actually see it somewhere first before I make that decision. And I have not seen it in any shops. There's just nowhere here, in the New England area that I've seen it. So, I'm going off of just what I've seen online. So again, I'm not sold. I would like to look at it, but I just, I'm having a hard time getting past that face. Now, if you've got any suggestions, let me know. I'm also going to be putting up the P.O. box probably in the next episode. So if there's anything you want to send to be featured on the channel, that's where you're going to send it. And every single share and like and a piece of engagement helps the channel move forward. So if you want to keep seeing Strange Form, engage with it as much as possible. Show it wherever you can. Get involved, because that's the only way the channel is going to be able to move forward. But for now, thank you for watching this episode. And as always, remember, never stop collecting.